In 1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. And next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress. I am running in Ohio 10, which is constitutionally unconstitutional. It includes all of Montgomery County, all of Greene County, parts of Clark County. My opponent is 10-term incumbent Mike Turner. Mike Turner doesn't have town halls, so I do this every day, Monday through Friday, 4 o'clock, to talk to you and get your feedback. It looks like there are 3 of you here watching. I'd love for you to drop comments on YouTube. We haven't quite figured out how for me to see the Facebook comments as this is going, but somebody can hopefully see them and tell me. But we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects today, and that is sprawl and urban blight. And the two are interrelated, really. And Mike Turner came across as some sort of new urban pioneer. He bought a house in Huffman and ran for mayor and was supposedly this progressive guy. And he was active with Preservation Dayton, which worked on Dayton's historic districts. Historic district zoning is kind of interesting because it's the only thing that's worked really to prevent urban blight in this area. And you can see where the historic district stops generally and where the non-historic district is. And it's not just because of the changes in materials or the way things have been renovated or rehabbed, but also in the amount of boarded up houses and everything else. When I moved down here and bought my house for $14,500, my father thought I was batshit crazy. So did many of my friends. They all would comment, look at those 3 crappy little houses across the street. Your house will never be worth anything because those are there. Later on, one of those became my parents' house, and now they're both Airbnbs and doing quite well, and people love them. They didn't have to be torn down because they're not a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with a attached garage. Not everybody needs that Huber home solution. Nobody needs the driveway and the 2-car garage and all the rest of that. And this is where America got off track with when we switched really to thinking everybody had to live in a home with a yard and 2-car garage and, attached 2-car garage for that matter, so you don't have to see or talk to your neighbors. You pull in your garage and walk straight into your house. That model has probably been the biggest mistake we've ever made. Now, give you some historical background. Back around end of World War II, Dayton and Atlanta were about the same size. They are no longer. And when the GIs came back from overseas after World War II and came back to Dayton, there was a scramble on how to house them. So people were subdividing things and building little apartments galore. The building we're sitting in now was a Corner's grocery store. And after the war, they took the back section and they added on to it, and there were actually 2 apartments downstairs, 1 apartment upstairs, and then the store in the front. That kind of multiple tenancy, multiple use got frowned upon in the 60s and the 70s. They like single use and matching everything up. So what happened to this idea of small homes, single room occupancy? Single room occupancy was banned. In fact, in Dayton, if you have 3 people not related living in the same house, more than 3, you are technically running a boarding house, and that's illegal. But single room occupancy, they used to have these all over where they were furnished places that you could rent for by the week, by the month, by the quarter, by the year. And they were furnished. They had you'd get a bedroom with a lock on the door. You'd have a shared bathroom. You'd have a shared kitchen, and people would learn to live and work together. A friend of mine who was a tile mason used to have about 3 or 4 houses in East Dayton that he had split up as single room occupancy, and he had quite a few people paying between $75 and $105 or $115 a week to live there. And each week when he'd come to collect the rent, and it was mostly a cash business, when he'd collect the rent, he would drop off clean linens and take their old ones to make sure that they had clean sheets and everything was up to par and they could see what was going on. That was illegal. Now, if you wonder why we have homeless people, so many of them, and people struggling, 1, we closed down the mental hospitals in the 80s under Reagan, and 2, the cost to move from homeless to homed is incredibly high because we don't have these multi-family units. We don't have the abilities to have low cost, low overhead. I mean, you have to pay water, you have to pay trash, you have to pay gas and electric, you have to pay rent, you have to have homeowners insurance, you have to have a credit score even to move in, you have to pay a fee for a background check, all these things. You have to have credit. They can be daunting. And then to top it all off, you might need a car because we haven't invested in public transit. We don't have a way to get from your home to work without a car. And a lot of these people just can't put all these pieces together because there's nobody to help them. So we have social service agencies, we have all these other things. It hasn't worked. The problem isn't in the housing we have, it's in the type of housing we have. It's not in the way we provide incentives for these things. It's the whole system is set up for two earners, live together as a family unit, have a car. It's set up for that. And that is really, really difficult. And I see Tam Stefanik commented about the closing of the mental hospitals caused a lot of problems and a lot of homelessness. So the interesting thing is Tam's parents had a barber shop, and above the barber shop were apartments. And if you go, and they were occupied. If you go downtown, all along 3rd Street, all those buildings had residences above them. You could live and work within walking distance. And that was an ideal situation. And it's coming back. I was just visiting with a good friend, Kevin Harrington, who owns downtown Dayton Optical, which is temporarily closed, but will reopen in January. And he's living in, I believe it's called the Barclay Building, on the corner there. And he's got a really nice 1-bedroom apartment, and he could take the elevator down and go to his shop 2 doors down. I walk across the street from my house to my office. Do you realize the environmental savings we have when you don't have to drive, you don't have to burn fossil fuels, you don't have to take up space with parking your car either? So mass transit and walking to work are things that we really can do wonders with to increase the livability and accessibility, access for people who can't get out of homelessness. But this, this pay by the week thing works well for some people. Not everybody's set up to be banked, and in fact there's a large unbanked population. But let's talk about the shifts in population. Dayton had a school system that was built and at one time had over 60,000 students. 60,000 students. If you ever saw Roosevelt High School, it was huge. If you saw some of these old buildings that we've torn down, they were massive. They had student bodies that, that we're talking 2,000 and 3,000, 4,000 kids in a building. Colonel White was huge. These were big schools. And with the shrinking of the population in the city of Dayton, we had to build schools out in the suburbs to take the people that left Dayton over busing in the 70s. So we're building new schools. Then we had to build new schools in Dayton because the old schools, which were built for much bigger population, didn't work anymore and weren't efficient. So we paid for new schools again. How many times have we had to pay for this shift of population and sprawling out? And we're still doing it. We're still building more in cornfields instead of taking buildings and rehabbing them or packing them back with housing and every other option. We haven't figured out that it costs, there's a lot of hidden costs in sprawl. Until we figure that out, we're doomed. So, I've been all over this city hanging basketball nets for free. And I've seen buildings that are perfectly capable of being rehabbed. It's not easy work. Rehab, it takes more skills than new construction. New construction's basically, like building a model airplane. All the pieces are nice and square and straight, and you measure it out, you put it together, and boom, boom, boom. Rehab doesn't work like that. I've done 5 of them. I'm about to embark on a 6th. I know the processes. So how do we incentivize it? And that's where historic district zoning really kicked in, because they mandated that you put things back the way it used to be on the outside. So there was no cheating or cutting corners, and you kept the character of the neighborhood. you also didn't allow them to tear down the house next door, have all these empty lots, because when you start having vacant neighborhoods, there's no community, there's no way to build it back. And because real estate loans and redlining exist and people want to, appraise the value of your home based on your neighbor's home, you have a real problem as the houses thin out. So what do we need to do? First off, we have to start looking at, if there's no population growth, you shouldn't be building new unless you take something out. Now that sounds really expensive. If we did a straight square foot for square foot swap, you have to tear down an 1,800 or 2,000, 2,500 square feet of old buildings in order to build a new one. Developers would get really ticked. So while that's probably a good idea and force that in, that's number one. But number two is we could actually sell those credits. Somebody else rehabs it and sells those credits those guys need, like a carbon tax, an offset, to developers building new construction. So as part of your new construction, you either got to fix it up or tear it down somewhere else. Now, if you fix it up, who should get the benefits? One of the things that needs to happen is, I bought my house for $14,500. When I moved down here in '86, you could buy any house on the block for that. Is it right that what I paid $14,500 and put all that sweat equity in, is it right to start taxing it at $200,000 because somebody else's house that they did and sold for it was $200,000? No, I made an investment. I held the investment. We have to reward people for holding and staying in place. We don't need to make it so grandma and grandpa have to give up their house because all the yuppies moved in. That's not government that's doing good for the people. Yes, values might be going up, property tax revenues might be going up, but at what cost? When grandma and grandpa decide to sell it, they shouldn't be having to pay a penalty either on their rise in value because they held the investment for so long. The new person can pay the taxes based on the value, not the person who built it and had the faith to fix it up and live in it all those years. So, we've had a thing called hub zones by the federal government for a long time. Hub zones stand for historically underutilized business zones. Hub zones are supposed to be given extra credit in government bidding, and the requirement is that your business is located in the hub zone and at least 35% of your employees live in the hub zone. But they don't really give out the contracts because the GSA doesn't really have a program to help small business. They consider small businesses 500 employees. That's not what we're talking about here. The hub zone stuff has been on the books for a long time, and it hasn't sparked a renaissance on the west side, and it hasn't saved any of those buildings. So, how do we do this? Okay, so you got to take a look at a regional area and look at what the average value of a home is. And then you take that average value and you say, if they're under that average value and by like 80%, we are going to help you with low interest loans. We're going to help you with making sure that you're going to go there and stay there and guard that investment, or turn it into something that's a long-term thing. Because the thing that makes communities work is people. It's not the houses. And that was the problem South Park had until I really shifted the neighborhood into thinking about, this is a fun, great place to live where neighbors become friends. We did a video with the music of Buckwheat Zydeco. It was called South Park Soliloquy. It was a love letter to my neighborhood. And I did this in, I think it was 96, about the same time Mike Turner was having me arrested. And that video it's on YouTube. It's been up for a long time. I think there's two versions. It's on in two places. It's had, 30, 40,000 views. That made this neighborhood, it wasn't selling the houses. It was selling the community. You need to have people that want to live in a neighborhood and don't feel like they're outcasts or pioneers by themselves. They need a team. So we have to foster it by making the incentives say, if you move here, if you move your business here and you employ these people in here, we will help that happen, because walk to work is ultimately the goal. Having jobs close to where people live works. And if you can get the density high enough, then the grocery stores follow and everything else. The problems of whole areas being relegated to single family housing is the biggest damage for density. And density is what franchises look for. It's what grocery stores look like. It's what services look for. They want to get close to a whole bunch of people at a certain income level. And you're not going to have that unless you make it really, really a good value to go back and invest there. We've seen that done with some of the downtown housing, which got huge incentives, and it worked. So you had Cooper Place, and then a long time you didn't have anything. Then you had the Ice Avenue Lofts. Then you had the St. Clair Lofts, Ice Avenue Lofts, the Beaver Power Building, which is the lofts on St. Clair. You had Water Street come in with new construction. You had the Delco Lofts. It all started to come together, and then you see moving down to the fire blocks. All of that was heavily subsidized. Now, what a lot of people don't know is the city still owns the old Key Bank building or Society Bank building, or I don't remember which savings and loan it was on 3rd Street, right next to the Kettering Tower. The city has no business owning real estate and sitting on it. That needs to go into the hands of a developer. I don't care what price they get it at. I care about what kind of income they get from the people who live there and how it helps bring people closer to jobs and closer and pack that density back in. So we've seen some, things moving along 3rd Street. We haven't seen as much on Main. But again, we've paid the price for people moving out into the suburbs. We've paid the price in building all these new amenities, extending utilities, extending services like police and fire. And our community's still stuck at the same 500,000 or so. It hasn't gotten any bigger. We haven't had a net gain, even though our population is spread out over a larger area. When I first got to Wright State, there were cornfields where the mire is. Across the street, there were cows. Cows. 675 stopped at Fairfield Road, and it was a 2-lane road. Now look at it. Where is the market from all that? That was what was downtown. We had huge stores, department stores, and other services, but nobody wanted to go down there because everybody was reliant on a car, and parking was rough. At some point, we have to move away from an automobile-centered parking situation, transportation system, to something that works, mass transit or self-driving vehicles that can drive themselves away and park somewhere and then come when you need them. We need to stop commuting so far to get to work, which means putting people, jobs, businesses near housing. Housing needs to have a variety. It needs to have high density, medium density, and low density all together. This plat after plat of single family all look the same thing is a bad model, and it's hurt for years. So, the government has to take an initiative. At some point, they have to say, we need to look at sustainable, reliable, responsible development. We need to stop spending so much money demolishing homes and filling landfills and start looking towards a way to change it. And I got to look at my phone here because I can't see my clock, but that's okay. So the I'm seeing a comment here from Tam again. Mixed-use zoning and part of what makes some European countries so enjoyable to live in. Here we have to drive to get a cappuccino, an ice cream, a cocktail, instead of taking a short walk. And yes, we've lost that. And it kills me because this neighborhood used to have like 5 different neighborhood grocery stores. And the grocery stores, that's what this building was. In fact, it was a Kroger from 1927 to 1930. People don't think of a Kroger as having 800 square feet. They think of a Kroger as, 50,000, 100,000 square feet. That's not how it started. They were more like bodegas. We used to have bars inside the neighborhood. We had restaurants inside the neighborhood. You could walk to the end of the street and go eat, and you'd know the neighbors and everybody else. That's all gone. And the zoning has wiped it out. In fact, they incentivized turning these businesses into single-family housing. And it hasn't worked. And the cost of the demolishing of all these homes is at the center of the culture of corruption, Operation Demolished Integrity. Because one of the people making the most money in this town has been the demolition contractor who paid politicians to help do this. We need to look at what our future is going to be. And putting Intel out in a cornfield was never the answer. To keep giving incentives to companies to go and build new things instead of reusing them. I'm really happy to see Amazon's distribution point at the old Gentilly station using buildings that are from the 40s. That should get a reward. Building new ones out at the airport? No, that should not. And we have to look back at the way we used to transport things too as well. Rail is much more efficient, much more than trucks. Rail is more efficient than airplanes. How much of our freight is moving via rail? And how much of our people movement is going by rail? Rail is viable. Joe Biden used to take the train to get to work in D.C. He knows what it's like, but he was on a train that went 80 tops. In Europe and in Japan and in China, trains are going 300 miles an hour, which when you figure out the boarding times of planes and the packing and unpacking, you end up faster on a train than you will in a plane. So let's look at what's going to happen. How are we going to change it? And the first thing is you need to change your congressman, because for 20 years Mike Turner hasn't done anything to fix this problem. He's not aware of it. He doesn't understand it, and he hasn't made a difference in his community. That's one of the things I think I'm proudest of, that and the basketball nets. And while you might scoff at hanging free basketball nets, it got the city guilted into spending over $1 million fixing up the city public basketball courts and making sure there's always a net on the rim, something that hadn't happened for decades. These are the things that make our communities livable. These are the things that make our communities communities. And that's when we have people working together to get our social capital to produce the results we want. Safe neighborhoods, happy people, people that are homed, people that are not insecure from, their car breaks down and everything goes to hell. They can't get to work, they get fired, they lose their job, they lose their house. All these things, that's part of security. Anyway, I have to say, I had a wonderful birthday on Wednesday night, and some people said some really wonderful things and reminded me of how much I'm willing to take in abuse in running my campaign. So I see we got one more comment here from Matt Truman saying high-speed rail costs $1 million a mile, although it would be nice to have that one run from Cleveland to Cincinnati. And yeah, I've seen the $1 million a mile thing. Trust me, we spend millions a mile on our highways, constantly resurfacing them. and we're spending millions on paying for gas taxes to keep those roads going. It really doesn't matter how much we spend on high-speed rail. It's a much more efficient mode of transportation that will change the game. You have to think of the big picture, okay? If you can get from here to Cleveland, here to Cincinnati in 15 minutes instead of in an hour and longer in traffic. If you can get here to Columbus in 15 minutes. If you can get to Cleveland in an hour and a half. Think about the value. Think about what changes. And think about, if it's electric, which most of the high-speed rail is, how much energy we're going to save. And Bill says it was a great birthday party, and it was great having you there, Bill. So a couple updates real quick. I've got new t-shirts on the way. The ones that will say defund politics, they should be here in about a week. Defund politicians. We've got a new app to start doing our canvassing, and here's the great thing, it's got a social component. So you just are going to download the app, join the campaign, and reach out to all your friends that you already have in your contacts list and on social media and ask them to join in and work with us so that we can get something going here and knock Mike Turner out this November. So if you're on my email list, you'll get an email about that on Sunday. If you aren't on my email list, please go to electesrai.com/subscribe. If you like this video, please share it with friends. A lot of people watch it after the fact as well as live. I'd like to thank the 7 people that are on right now. That's awesome. Make sure you hit subscribe and hit the little bell to be notified every time we go live. So if we want to go live at another time, boom, you're there. And last but not least, remember, if you donate, you are entered to win a Shepherd Ferry poster. We gave one away at my fundraiser birthday party on Wednesday night. Larkin was ecstatic. It comes with free framing from my friends at Custom Frame Services on Wayne Avenue. Dave does a great job. These are signed Shepherd Ferry prints. Literally, these things go up in value. They're beautiful, and they make a statement. So, I got all those things coming. The Ohio Democratic Party turned me down from using their software for canvassing with their data in it. It's okay, guys. You're not the only game in town. And guess what? I know how to reach people better than Mike Turner, and we're going to prove it. And we're going to do it with whatever money we got. We're going to make that difference. So, I need to enlist all of your help. Go there, subscribe, like the page on Facebook. The app will be rolling out this weekend, and you just download it and you're off and running. Now, if you want campaign literature to go, you can contact me and we'll get it to you. But right now, you can do it just with the app. It has all kinds of tools like for registering voters, checking to see somebody's registered. You can use it anywhere. It's really fabulous. So, thank you for joining me. We'll be back Monday. I've invited other candidates to come on. I've still got my invitation out to my friend Mike Weber. If you know anybody else that wants to come in, let me know. I hope you enjoyed the talk with Eric Price yesterday. We're working on more stuff coming up. And thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We will see you Monday at 4 o'clock. Thank you.